my mind just explode? Welcome Losties to Blogging It Up. My name is Robert and I'm going to review Season 6 of Lost. Now if you're subscribed to my channel for my tour reviews, movie reviews, I'll still be doing those. Last night's episode was titled Lax Part 1 and 2, so I'm going to be reviewing and recapping 2 episodes. I'm going to split this review up into 3 parts. The first part I'm going to review and recap the new timeline where everything seems to be reset. Then I'm going to review all stuff with Jack and Sawyer and going to the temple. And then I'll be looking at all stuff with Flock and Richard and killing Jacob and all that stuff. So I'm going to begin by looking at the new timeline that was created. And the most important thing about this new timeline is it can make your hair grow. Look at Jack, his hair has grown. I'm only joking. The most important thing to look at here is the fact that the island has sunk. How did the island sink? We could say that Juliet set off the bomb and somehow the bomb caused the island to sink, but I don't think that's the case because everything seemed to be intact underwater. So I'm guessing later on the season we'll figure out how the island ended up sinking. So the episode begins with Jack looking out the window like he did in the pilot episode. There's some turbulence and for a second Jack almost seems like, oh yeah, this is it, the plane is going down. The plane just keeps going, it doesn't crash. There's 2 interesting moments that revolve around Jack. First off, he goes to the bathroom and there's a cut on his neck. We don't know how he got this cut on his neck. And this is where I think the 2 timelines may be merging with each other. Later on in the episode we find out that Locke's knives are missing, and we also find out that Jack's dad's body is missing also. Is this a result of 2 timelines merging into one? The second weird thing involving Jack is he goes back to his seat and Desmond is sitting there. Desmond said a man is snoring and he moves seats. Jack starts looking at him really weird, as if he knew him before. And we all know that these 2 met at the stadium when Jack was running up and down the steps. But a few moments later, Desmond disappears. And we have no idea where he went. One, Desmond could have moved seats. Again, but there's no reason why he would. Or second of all, like I said, the 2 timelines are merging and somehow Desmond has disappeared, travelling through time. Hurley has won the lottery still, but he hasn't used the numbers that were on the island because the island is underwater. And because the island is underwater, Leonard, who was in the mental institution with Hurley, never heard the numbers and he never repeated those numbers back to Hurley, which he used to play the lottery with. So Hurley used a different set of numbers and he has bought Mr. Clucks, and Hurley is in the TV advertisements. He is the head poncho of Mr. Clucks, and Dr. Arts is trying to get him to do the Australian accent he does in one of the adverts. And it's interesting to note that Sawyer turns around and says, you know, do not tell anyone that you are a millionaire because people will use you. And I'm wondering if that will come into play later on the season. Maybe Sawyer later on the season will try to con Hurley. Another 2 characters who start conversation on the plane is Boone and Locke. Boone asks Locke, why are you here? Is it business or pleasure? And Locke explains, I went on a walkabout. Which, you know, he's clearly lying because he's still on a wheelchair. Also note that Shannon is not on the plane with Boone. I don't see why the island sinking would affect Shannon not being on the plane. That is strange, and that's why I think this time reset may be caused not because Juliet hit the bomb with the rock, but I think something later on this season in the original timeline will cause the past to change somehow, and it may affect why Shannon is not on the plane. Later on in this episode, a doctor is asked to come to the bathrooms. Jack steps up and says he's a doctor. Sai comes along and goes kung fu and kicks the door in of the bathroom, and inside the bathroom is Charlie, who has stuck some drugs rolled up in some plastic down his mouth, which he clearly was trying to hide so no one would catch him. Jack saves his life. When Charlie is saved, he's really pissed off at Jack. He's not happy at all. He wanted to die. He says, Jack, I was supposed to die. And this is a little nod back to the original timeline where Charlie couldn't be saved. He had to die. Kate is also on the plane and she is still being handcuffed by the marshal. Once the plane lands, she goes to the bathroom. The marshal is waiting outside. Earlier on in the episode, she robs a pen off Jack, and she uses this pen to escape. She gets out of the cuffs, knocks the marshal out, and escapes into a taxi. She takes out a gun and holds the taxi man hostage, and in the back of the taxi is Claire. It's going to be really interesting where this taxi ride will go. Jin and Sun are also on the plane, and Jin is still an asshole to Sun. Once they get off the plane, Jin's briefcase gets searched, and he has more than $10,000 in there, which he didn't declare. So he's taken away by the police while Sun has to wait at the airport. After Jack gets off the plane, he finds out that his dad's body is missing, and Locke's knives are missing also. Because these items are missing, Jack runs into Locke, and they have a really interesting conversation where Locke says, your dad is not missing. His body's missing, but your dad's not missing. Jack says to Locke, oh, how did you end up in that wheelchair? And he says he was asking because he's a spinal surgeon. And Locke says, don't worry about it, my condition is irreversible. And Jack looks at Locke and says, nothing is irreversible. This is where Jack's God complex kicks in. Jack is always trying to help people, and it's interesting that off the island that Jack wants to help Locke so badly that he'll give him the card and said, this one's on the house. This new timeline is very, very interesting, and I think that it's great to see how these characters will interact with each other if they didn't crash on the island. But at the same time, I don't think this timeline is just straightforward. I think it's somehow it's going to merge, or something's going to happen between this timeline and the original timeline. Now we jump back to the original timeline, which is timeline 1, and I'll refer to the new timeline as timeline 2. So in timeline 1, everyone who was around the bomb when it went off have gone back to the year 2007. Somehow causing the bomb to explode makes you go back to your original timeline. Sawyer is like super pissed at Jack because he blames Jack for the death of Juliet. He says, Jack, your plan didn't work. You caused the death of Juliet. And Kate hears Juliet underneath the rubble on the Swan Station. Sawyer starts digging through the rubble.